I told you that coffee you had this morning didn't actually give you energy? It's all a myth. Or about that guy that once tried to smuggle 300 venomous spiders onto a flight. Snakes on a plane is one thing, but spiders? You might not believe them, but here are 20 random facts that are 100% true. What's worse than sitting next to a screaming baby on a flight? Try sitting next to a guy with hundreds of venomous tarantulas in his pants. In November 2024, a 28-year-old South Korean man was arrested at a Peruvian airport after authorities discovered 320 tarantulas, 110 centipedes, and 9 bullet ants he'd managed to strap to his body. He took them from Peru's Madre de Dios rainforest, known for harboring thousands of species found nowhere else on Earth. I mean, this sounds like an elaborate plan, so you'd expect to have an elaborate excuse. Not for this guy. When he was caught, he simply said, "I'm a collector." It may work for Pokemon, but illegal wildlife, not so much. If you're into creepy fish parasites, then you can't go past the tongue-eating louse. True to its name, it eats tongues, specifically fish tongues. First, the parasite latches onto the tongue and drains it dry until it withers and dies. It then goes on to replace what was previously the tongue with itself. But why? Well, this gives it a front row seat to any food that comes along. The fish goes about its business unaware its tongue isn't really its tongue. From then on, every meal is now a meal for two. What's worse than wearing one of those ridiculous looking powdered wigs from the 1700s? I'll tell you, wearing one infested with lice. It was so common that men used to carry long ivory sticks called wig scratchers. Thin rods they'd slide under their wig and scratch their scalp without having to yank the whole thing off. It's the modern day equivalent of wearing skinny jeans. Sure, it's the fashion, I get that. But your feet may very well turn blue. Caffeine doesn't actually give you energy. It just tricks your brain into thinking you're not tired. It works by blocking adenosine, the chemical that makes you feel sleepy. With no sleep signals, your brain stays alert and focused, but it's an illusion. You're not getting a free dose of energy, you're just borrowing that same energy you are going to use later. This is why the post-coffee crash is inevitable. What would you prefer, hitting the gym or hitting the sauna? I know what I'd choose. Well, the two aren't all that different, physiologically speaking, that is. Relaxing in a sauna increases your heart rate and makes you sweat in much the same way moderate exercise does. In fact, a study of 2,000 middle-aged men found that frequent sauna users had around a 40% lower risk of death from all causes compared to those that weren't. So instead of how much you can bench, try sitting on a bench. Either way, you'll sweat it out. Brain freezes aren't fun, but there's a way to stop them. That stabbing pain you get in your forehead when you gulp down a bucket of ice cream. Yeah, we've all been there. That's a brain freeze. It happens when something cold hits the roof of your mouth and rapidly cools the tiny blood vessels. This causes them to overreact and expand, triggering those pain signals to your brain. But the good news is, there's a hack. Try pressing your tongue firmly against the roof of your mouth. Give it a go. It'll defrost your brain in seconds. If you're struggling to get to sleep, here's a tip. Try staying awake. It may sound counterintuitive, but it's actually a proven technique. It's called paradoxical intention, and psychologists have been studying it since the 1970s. In one classic experiment, insomniacs told to resist sleep actually drifted off faster than those who tried to force it. They say the moment you stop stressing about having to sleep, the pressure lifts and your brain finally relaxes enough to switch off. It's the ultimate application of reverse psychology, tricking yourself. So here's an interesting one. Paying someone to do something that they already enjoy can actually make them enjoy it less. Psychologists call this the Overjustification Effect, and it completely changes how we think about motivation. A 1970s study split children who loved drawing into groups. Some were rewarded for their art and others weren't. When the rewards stopped, the rewarded kids quickly lost interest in drawing, while the kids who never got the rewards didn't. So, the fastest way to destroy a passion, well, you just gotta put a price tag on it. If you see a car with heaps of bumper stickers, well, that means the driver is officially a psycho. A 2008 study found a pretty interesting correlation between the number of stickers and the likelihood of road rage. And it doesn't matter if the stickers are funny, political, or those slightly annoying my family ones. The quantity alone is a red flag. The experts say that plastering a car in stickers exhibits territorial behaviour. So if you spot a bumper that looks like a billboard, give up the parking space. They'll just take it anyway. Traffic jams aren't fun, but what's even worse is when you realise it was literally caused by nothing. There was no crash, no roadworks, just an endless sea of brake lights. The phenomenon is called the phantom traffic jam. It starts with a few cars tapping their brakes. Could be they're distracted or driving too close. And this leads to a ripple effect which forces every driver behind them to brake a little harder. And the result, a completely fabricated traffic jam. So if you're late to work, the old stuck in traffic excuse won't fly. You literally caused it yourself. Squirrels are single-handedly keeping forests alive. They just don't realise it. Each year, they bury thousands of nuts and seeds in secret hiding spots to gear up for winter. This is good in theory, provided you remember where you left them. But their memories aren't the best. A large portion of their stash goes unrecovered. Scientists even have a name for it. They call it scatter hoarding. These abandoned acorns end up sprouting into brand new trees, all thanks to forgetful squirrels. Twins don't just share DNA, they share a whole made up language. There's a phenomenon called cryptophagia where twins invent a private language that only they can understand. It's not just random gibberish, they have their own words, grammar, and gestures. They say around 40% of twin pairings develop their own lingo, a bit more than 500,000 new undiscovered languages each year. If you go out for a stroll with a friend, you'll soon find that you both start walking in sync. It's called entrainment, and it's the subconscious syncing of biological rhythms. And it's not just footsteps, our breathing, even heart rates, fall into perfect sync with those around us. We aren't the only ones. Nature has a cadence for everything. There's fireflies that flash together in dazzling light shows to crickets chirping in unison. How many times can you clap in a minute? Try 1,103. Before you tell me it's not possible, it is. Some guy did it. That guy was Eli Bishop, a speed clapper from Tennessee. He managed to crank out over 18 claps per second. But Eli isn't one of those boring old flat-handed clappers. He opts for the fancier technique of wrist clapping, snapping his wrist so fast his fingers flick his other hand. It's not the most conventional way to applaud, but it works. Some call it a pointless talent, but not Guinness. I mean, they gave him a world record. Canned food was invented about half a century before anyone thought to invent something to open it. In the early 1800s, soldiers and sailors relied on cans to preserve food. At the time, they were made of thick iron, and it was normal for people to use chisels, hammers, or even bayonets to try and crack them open. It wasn't until about 50 years later that the can opener finally arrived. It's like inventing the lock before the key. The word quiz was invented as a joke. Back in 1791, a Dublin man made a bet that he could invent a completely nonsense word and get the whole city using it within 48 hours. He hired a bunch of street kids to plaster it in chalk all over the city, and by the end of the weekend, this mysterious new word was the talk of the town. At the time, it meant absolutely nothing, pure gibberish. They started using it as slang to describe anything odd or peculiar. It's like the skibbity of the 1700s. People from the Victorian era used to send secret messages through flowers. They called it floriography. It turned every bouquet into a hidden language. A red rose meant they were deeply in love. A yellow rose, let's just be friends. But a yellow carnation, now that's one to avoid. It meant complete and utter rejection. Back then, they even published flower dictionaries so people could translate the meanings. It's the 19th century equivalent to sliding into someone's DMs. Why do they call the movies the silver screens? Well, it dates back to the early 1900s when theatre screens, they weren't just plain white. They were coated with silver metallic paint. The shiny reflective surface helped produce higher quality, crisper images. And while today's theatres are all modern fabrics and digital projectors, the phrase endured. Hollywood stars are apparently still lighting up the silver screen. I'm sure you've heard of upper and lowercase keys, but how did they actually get their name? Well, it dates back to the days of printing presses, when each letter of the alphabet was cast as a small metal block with the character raised backwards on one end. People used to store these blocks in shallow wooden drawers called cases. The capital letters were kept in the uppercase drawer, and the smaller ones in the lowercase drawer. So upper and lowercase don't really describe the keys at all. It's all about how they were stored. While you're soaking up the sun on holiday, Americans are stuck behind their desks. The United States is the only advanced economy in the world with no federal law guaranteeing paid vacation. Whether you get time off and how much depends entirely on your employer. This is rough, especially when you consider Europeans are legally guaranteed at least 4 weeks, Brazilians a whole month, and Australians get 20 days by law. So who needs a cocktail and a hammock when you've got an inbox full of emails? The tongue map is a complete lie. Your taste buds can actually sense every flavour. And parents may deny it, but studies have found that most secretly have a favourite child. And finally, in Arizona, it's literally illegal, like against the law, to let a donkey sleep in your bathtub. If you want more random facts, stick around for the next one. It's been fun. I'll catch you next time.